Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Profiling Evil Live. I'm really excited about the guest that I have on today, not only because she's a friend, but because she is really up to speed on the Delphi case. And Friday's hearing, if you remember, it was scheduled as a status hearing. The first half was set to be closed to the public and then later open to the public. But about 30 minutes into this thing, the sheriff walked out of the room and said there isn't going to be a hearing that's public. Let me bring in my guest, Susan Hendricks. Susan, how are you?
Mike, it's so good to see you. I'm doing great.
It's a blast to be with you. It seems like it's just too much time is passing between when we actually see face to face, but at least we have tweets and things to work with. Now, folks, if you don't know Susan Hendricks, you will remember her from CNN and HLN, where she served as an anchor and a veteran reporter. She's really known for her deep dives, and I really have come to know her because of her deep dives into the true crime genre. And you are not going to want to miss getting a hold of her book, Down the Hill, which chronicles the Delphi murder case. In fact, I met the family of the children that were murdered through Susan while we were at CrimeCon, Susan. That was a pretty touching night in and of itself.
Yeah, it really was. And I remember you going up to Becky and introducing me to Becky, and Tara was there as well. And do you believe it's been a year? That September, coming up on a year. So that was when the whole Odinist theory, that 139 document, was released. I believe that day we were on court TV together, but the family just loved meeting you.
Well, they were so delightful. And I think one of the things that's so special is they know that they can trust you. You spend a great deal of time in the last 5+ years coming to understand what happened in that case. And maybe a great starting point for anyone who may not know about the Delphi murder case is just take us back and paint a quick picture of that fateful morning on the Monon High Bridge Trail.
It was February 13th, 2017. It was a makeup snow day, so it was warmer than normal, and they had a day off. It was Monday, and Abby and Libby slept at Libby's house, and Becky was there that morning, Kelsey as well, and Mike, and they woke up and had a fun sleepover and a fun night, and Libby said to Kelsey, her older sister, "Hey, will you drive us to the Monon High Bridge? We drive us to High Bridge." That's what the kids call it. Can you drive us to the trails? And she said, well, and she said to me, Susan, I had said no so many times and I felt guilty. Like, no, I can't drive you here. No, I can't take you to the movies. No, no, no. So I thought I really need to say yes. So said, yes, I have to get ready to go to work or her boyfriend's house, I believe, first. And just, I can drive you, but I can't pick you up. So I believe first they asked Becky, though. Then they asked Kelsey. And Kelsey said, yes, but someone else has to pick you up. And her dad, Derek, said, I can pick you up a few hours later around 3:30. So Kelsey drives them to the bridge, and I took that ride with her. I was in Kelsey's car, and she was nice enough to drive me there and to see how close it was to their home, drop them off, kind of went over it in her head and said she'll never get it out of her head, and said, I love you. Oh, don't forget to take your jacket. And I love you, and watch them both walk off. And that's the last time she ever saw them. So,
Susan, let me ask you something here, because I've only seen this area from aerial maps, and I created some pretty extensive maps on it, but you have it looks like a freeway system, and then there's the exit ramps, and then it goes down into a parking lot, and then the trail kind of heads, if I'm visualizing it right, about southwest of that little freeway system. Is that right?
Yeah. And where Kelsey pulled up, and I do have this, there was a GoPro camera and I have it. And so you see us kind of driving, and it's very rural. So you're driving by spacious land, and it feels like a place that nothing bad could ever happen. I know that's been overused or said a lot, like nothing ever happened in this town, but it really didn't. And so we pull up, and you kind of walk to a trail, and it took about, here's why immediately authorities thought it was someone local, because Mike, before I was there, I saw the aerial shots, I was reporting on it, but on the set, and that's very different in terms of the visuals and then being there in person. So I'm walking, and we had 2 photojournalists with us, and it was freezing the day I went. It was a February day. I think it was like February 9th, 2019, and for 9 degrees. So I have hand warmers, and we're walking. And I said, I'll catch up with you, because the photojournalist said, wait a minute, it says no trespassing, the route that we were going. Let me just call my boss. We're not allowed to get arrested. And so I said, all right, I'll walk ahead for a little bit. And then it was the middle of the day that we were walking there. And then it starts to feel isolating and it's dense. The brush is dense. And maybe because, of course, I knew what happened there, but it felt very alone. No one was there, maybe because of the weather. So I kept walking and walking. And then I ran back. And then we all went together, because I heard my mom's voice saying, don't go on those trails alone, and don't do it. I said, Mom, I'm fine. But it did feel, because when you hear trails, if you're familiar with the trails, I lived in Los Angeles for a couple of years before I moved to Atlanta. So when you think of trails, it's not like open space with a lot of people. It can be hidden. You can understand why this crime could have taken place down there. So you walk down and then you see it, and the massive Monon High Bridge is there. And it is, Mike, I'll tell you, I'm scared of heights. Photojournalist Lionel Mendez was there, and he said, hey, Susan, can you walk out a little and do a stand-up, it's called? And I couldn't take a step, Mike. But back in the day in New Jersey, behind my house, there's these woods, and we'd walk on these sewer pipes that were 20 feet up, and you can walk with no fear. So I think obviously kids have no fear. I'm sure if I was 13 or 14, like Abby and Libby, I would have walked on that bridge with no problem.
So how long did it take from, as you can see on the map, I pulled it up. If you walked from the parking area to the bridge,
I'd say
how long is that walk?
The walk, I'd say, since I was cold, I'm exaggerating on how long it took me, but I would say about 5-6 minutes. 6 minutes.
Oh, really? It's that short of a distance? 7
minutes. The walk, not the drive, the walk. So once you're dropped off at the trailhead, about 5, but it is deep in. So you have to know where you're going. In the beginning, when, of course, we first heard of it at CNN and HLN, could it have been a trucker passing through? I mean, we knew nothing. We weren't even that familiar with the area. But once you see it, you realize, oh, this is a local. And that's what the authorities had said because of where it took place. And so Kelsey dropped them off. They went down there. And the last thing we see is that Libby took a picture of Abby on the bridge. And I believe, was it 206 or 209? And uploaded it, if that's what you call it, to Snapchat, posted it on Snapchat. So in the early stages, it was called the Snapchat murders. And so they were supposed to get picked up by Libby's dad, Derek, around 3:30. He called her phone, no answer, no answer. They never showed up. Derek calls his mom, Becky, Libby's grandmother, says they're not here. What's going on? They're not here. All the family calls thinking, did someone fall? Are they hurt? Are they injured? Officially at 5:30 that evening, it was official that it was reported. I believe Mike called the authorities and said, look, we're going out to look. And so essentially the whole town got together and started to look. And the authorities were involved in that. The search was called off late at night, I think because it was dangerous down there and so dark, but no one went inside. I mean, the whole town continued to look. I remember Becky telling me it felt like there was this orange glow down there with everyone with their flashlights. They couldn't find the girls. Wow. The next morning, early, the official search started again. Some people never stopped. And their bodies were discovered a little bit after 12 noon the next day. And
so I'm going to pop this map back up again, Susan, just to kind of acclimate people to the area. So way at the very northern or the top part of this is the parking area. You follow the trail right along the edge of that really deep ravine down across the Monon High Bridge. And then I don't know how close I am, but I put where I think those initial contact spots happened, but where they ended up recovering the children the girls after they were murdered. And I found it so interesting, the location. And I don't know, as you did your research, what really jumped out to you about the location and why this predator, whether it's Richard Allen or somebody else, would take the girls down to this particular location. And then maybe you can kind of describe what the evidence has shown happened at the crime scene.
Yeah, because that's when I reported on it on set, I believe with Gene Casares. Gene Casares was on it first, and then I came on, I believe, the next day. I reported that the bodies were discovered, and I interviewed on the set Ron Logan, who owns the property where the girls' bodies were found. So that was 2017. So I hear from a producer, as you know, you have something in your ear and you're listening, and they say, we have Ron Logan, he owns the property. You're interviewing him after the next commercial break. So I do a mic check.
Crazy.
Ron, can you hear me? Yes, I can. And he said, I can't believe this. This happened here. I raised my sons here. I can't believe this would ever happen, Ron Logan said. And so that was that. So that's when I first reported on this.
So let me ask you just on that point, Susan. Now, this was Logan's farm right here, right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So the people can kind of put this into perspective, how intriguing he became in this whole picture. He's got coming off of his farm a pretty navigable valley to go down into the river bottom. I would suspect, just looking at this, that it's pretty easy to hike up and down through that area anyway, and probably has a few trails behind his home. But that's really interesting to see how close his home is to where the bodies were recovered. Yeah,
I remember speaking to Paul Holes about this. He's one of the chapters in the book, our conversation about it. And he said, Susan, I wondered how in the middle of the day, and things were out of perspective for me. He said, because in certain perspectives or certain maps, you could see there were homes in the area. He said, once I was there, I understood, because down the hill and where the bodies were found, and again, if it is Richard Allen, innocent until proven guilty, the trial's supposedly coming up this October. So he knew that area. His home was very close to that area. So if it was him, and if that was his plan, and if he was there and just, it was a crime of quote unquote opportunity, which is my opinion, that he wanted to do this and not knowing who was going to be the victims or victim, and decided to do that, he knew that he could get away with it based on the area that he knew. And he had them cross the creek, and we slowly but surely saw some of their clothing left in the creek years later. But back to the initial day. So soon after the girls' bodies were discovered, we find out that on Libby's phone was evidence, key evidence, which I believe drew so much more interest to this, because Libby had the right state of mind, thought, and I'll never forget what Mike said to me, Libby's grandfather, Susan, I think she was just recording and thought, she may come home and say, Grandpa, look at this creepy guy that was on the bridge. But she hit record, and what they released early on was a still shot, no audio at that particular time, but a still shot, and said, we're interested. Who is this person? And it was, I believe, taken just far enough away so his face was pixelated. You couldn't see it. You see this oversized blue, what turned out to be a Carhartt jacket, some baggy jeans, looked to be a hat. You couldn't really make it out, and a blurry face. And they were hoping, and I believe the authorities thought, because again, Delphi, Indiana, less than 3,000 people, that small of a town. And they were hoping that someone would come forward and say, oh my gosh, that's my uncle, that's my brother, that's my dad. And that never came. But that evidence, I believe, and soon after that, we heard Down the Hill that was released. So audio. So you had a still shot of this man on the bridge. Then you had his voice saying Down the Hill, his voice on their phone. And still no one could figure out who did this till so many years later, when Richard Allen was arrested and charged with the murders.
Now, there's this theory that when I was learning this art and science of profiling, we used to talk about the fact that in the 1960s, everybody knew their neighbor. They knew if the Fuller brush man came to town. There were no surprises. But in this era that we live in today, people are traveling through every community on the planet. But in the 60s, we were solving about 85 to 90% of all the murders that were occurring. Today, that number's dropped down into the 60% range. And much of that I attribute to this fact that we are in a much more mobile society. But there's a psychological thing that happens in a community, especially in small towns. And that is that people are quick to theorize this couldn't happen here. We're good old folk here, and this couldn't happen here. And they sometimes overlook things, but it doesn't seem like, if I remember early reports, that Richard Allen was necessarily overlooked. He was excluded at one point, but somebody interviewed him, didn't they?
Yes, he did an interview, come to find out years later, I mean, right before the arrest, we find this out in a court document. Dan Doolin, a conservation officer in a grocery store, we still don't know the full details exactly what day, I believe it was the day after, maybe, we don't know exactly yet, that he approached Dan Doolin and said, "Hey, I was down there. This is what I was wearing. This is the time that I was down there." And Dan Doolin, taking some notes, instead of writing down Richard Allen, wrote down Richard Whiteman. That's where he lives, Whiteman Drive, on Allen Drive. So I think, and I'm speculating here, but I have heard through the grapevine that they knew kind of each other. I mean, Richard Allen worked at CVS. If I saw the guy I know from CVS, I'd know his face, maybe not his name. And so I think because Richard Allen, having a daughter and a wife and a stand-up guy who works at CVS, that maybe, just maybe, he took it as more of a witness comment than a suspect, obviously. So he wrote down the tip, and we don't know what happened from the beginning to the end. It was quote unquote misplaced. Now, when we did hear that Richard Allen was in custody, there was an announcement or a release that said that it was a mistake by the FBI, that it was misplaced, the tip. And then the FBI came back right away and said, this wasn't our mistake. It wasn't us. So I'm not so sure, and I don't know exactly until trial what will come out here, but is that true? Or could that have been made up? Could it have been a tip from someone that knew Richard Allen and they just said it was a misplaced tip? I'm not sure what's true and what's not, but that is what we did here, that Dan Doolin got that tip early on, and that Superintendent Doug Carter, who I just saw, by the way, it was great to see him, even though that hearing was canceled. It was wonderful to talk to him, and he's retiring in 5 months. And, throughout this whole thing, just what a stand-up guy. He said, look, blame me. We can't say much. I can't say what I think. I have to say what I know. Just a solid leader throughout all this. And he always said, Mike, we will go back to the beginning. No matter what, we're going to solve this. When we go through every single tip, we're going to go back to the beginning. So I wonder too, in 2022, Richard Allen was arrested in October. Did they go back to the beginning and just start over and see this and say, hey, what about this? Well, the criticism is to Dan Doolin is, okay, a lot was going on. Everyone was taking tips. They're not used to something so horrific happening down there. But then you see the still shot. And then at April 22nd, 2019, at that now infamous press conference where the superintendent said, we went back over the evidence. We're on to you. We believe you lived in Delphi, still live here, or once lived here, and we believe that you could be in this room. And everyone's like, what do you mean this room? See, I get calls from CNN, you're on shows till midnight tonight. I mean, it was live shot after live shot. It was, is he in the room? Where is he? And it turns out Detective Holman, who I also saw on Friday and who I've gotten to know and really like, I mean, law enforcement was trying their best. They cared about these girls, and they still do. Yeah. He called me. We did an HLN special after that presser, and he said, call me back. And I said, okay. And I thought, did they catch him? And he said, you mentioned the FBI a lot during your special. And I said, well, you're not telling us anything, in a joking, like they would never tell us. And just, he's a wonderful guy, funny personality. And he said, well, it was our idea. The FBI told us not to do that press conference. And I was like, oh no. So I got the sense of the divide, and you know way more than me on that divide. So there wasn't that cohesiveness. It was like, we got this, we're good, we're okay. And I think the FBI was just in charge of the tips. So, and they thought the tip was going to come in. They truly did, of someone saying, I know the guy on the bridge. But back to that, the question you asked, and back to the small town in Delphi, and the reason why I think it took so long for this to be solved is that I feel like if you're in that town and you can't see the face, it's pixelated, it's not a clear picture. Everyone kind of looks the same with the blue jacket or the blue jeans. And without the face, I think it could have been anyone in that town. And no one wants to think. We all think of monsters as looking a certain way, or anyone capable of a child double murder of looking a certain way, and they don't. They blend in. And who's ever going to allow their minds to get to the point of, that's my dad? I mean, how does it get to that point if we don't see his face? So I believe that is what took so long. And maybe, in hindsight, everyone can criticize law enforcement, but I know their hearts were in it from the start.
Oh, yeah, I would agree with that. In fact, rarely do I reach out when I'm doing a YouTube video to the people in charge. But because in my professional life, I knew many of the people, at Indiana, I reached out to the public affairs person, and he said, "Hey, give me some time. Let's talk when this is over." And so I backed away at that point, as about as far as I dare go in probing. But the one thing that really troubled me is, like an arsonist, predators, if they are worried about damage control, will often step forward and offer up evidence of, hey, I happened to be in the area, or I was there, and establish I'm a good guy and here's my alibi. And I think that that's going to play very importantly into this case as it continues forward. Now, I want to just move ahead 5 years to last Friday, but maybe kind of talk about, in fact, before that, let's go back to the end of July when you were at the previous 3-day hearing in this case, and share with everyone some of the things that really impacted you, from the amount of evidence that was shared and the weight of that evidence in this case.
Yeah. And on the point that you just mentioned really quick about criminals or predators putting themselves there, I think that may turn out, again, innocent till proven guilty, to be his biggest downfall, because I believe that the image on Libby's phone wasn't released yet. And I think he came out ahead of it. And if he never did, who knows if he would have been arrested? Who knows? We know that there was an unseen.
I would agree.
But I think what was on her cell phone is going to be the key here. So there was a 3-day hearing, and there's been a lot of drama between the defense attorneys and Judge Frangel. So let's get past that. We're now at this 3-day hearing. And to me, it felt like a mini trial. It truly did. And you kind of saw how each side was going to go. I thought that the prosecutor, Nick McClelland, did an excellent job during those 3 days. And even the defense attorneys, Rosie with his cross-examination. I mean, it was witness after witness after witness. There's a couple that stand out. Now, Dawn Perlmutter was an expert on ritualistic symbols. So she was there as this Odinist, if you will, or an expert on ritualistic killings. So she was on the stand for more, it felt like 3 hours. I think it was about 2, being the defense witness and talking about her expertise and what she thought and how she 100% said this is what it looked like based on what she saw. And she was honest in terms of not knowing all the details of the investigation, but she said how it was described to me and what I saw, it 100% falls into this. Well, then the prosecution, the cross-examination comes, and she says, well, yes, it is my opinion. She was asked that by the prosecutor, and he said, McClelland, so this is your opinion. And she did make it clear that if it is a ritualistic killing, it can look very different because each murderer or each person has their own unique way. And I'm paraphrasing because I don't know much about ritualistic killing. So essentially he got to the point of saying, so this is your opinion. Yes. So he compared it. Is this like seeing an image in a cloud? And that looks that way to you. So you see something, but necessarily is it that way? So that stood out to me. Judge Gull hasn't, as of today, ruled on a third-party defense or if that will be allowed in terms of being able to discuss that at trial. Also, I wrote it down here. Okay, Indiana State Police, Brian Harshman, he was on the stand day 2, and he talked about the confessions that he listened to on Richard Allen's phone. I believe he had an iPad and listened to more than 600 conversations. And he said there was a turn that happened last March, that he believed that Richard Allen found God and said, I'm confessing. I'm paraphrasing here, his mom and his wife, that he found God and he wants to be in heaven with them. And he was going to tell the truth, but would they still love him? And he was concerned about getting into heaven and concerned about what they would think. And the couple conversations that you and I have even reported on said that the wife hung up abruptly at one call, and he wasn't giving all of the details, who was on the stand, Harshman, but he did say that, yes, motive was mentioned. So he was the final witness of day 2, and he was extremely powerful. I thought he was a witness that would hold up with the jurors, would like him. And I know likability shouldn't play in here. It should be just the evidence. But the cross-examination with the defense is saying, look, do you do this with every prisoner? And he said, no, I do it with some. So they were saying, look, you're targeting him. Why are you listening to all of these phone conversations? This is a narrative that you want. And it's always been discussed, Mike, that Richard Allen should not be in a prison, innocent until proven guilty, and he shouldn't be in this prison. They interviewed the prison psychologist. She was on the stand for a long time, and Rosie interviewed her. Turns out she was a fan of true crime, used to follow this case even before Richard Allen was in custody. So I wasn't sure. It went back and forth with Rosie. He did an excellent job, but I'm like, is this your witness or not? And I think some of the confessions to her, they don't want allowed in. But so much happened within these 3 days. But hearing her talk about the way he was treated, how much time was in isolation, how much time he was let out, that there were some sort of drug that was given to him to subdue him that was like it was compared to a tranquilizer. And I thought, ooh, he shouldn't be in this prison. And that's how I thought of it. And the prosecution was saying, well, wasn't he a suicide risk? So is that why he was in isolation? And the defense is saying, look, that's too much time in isolation. It shouldn't be. At the end of the 3 days, Judge Gull said, I will review all of the information that she got with those 3 days. But she did rule that he should be transferred to Cass County Jail from the prison. And I saw Richard Allen for the first time. He smiled. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, his wife and mother were not in court. So the last witness of the third day, who I'm getting to, it was so graphic what he testified to. He's a blood expert. He did a reenactment, if you will, to kind of understand the splatters and try to assess what he saw by the crime scene photos, that Richard Allen's mother and wife were not there. They were warned before and they didn't stay for that. So they had left. And I saw Richard Allen smile when Judge Gull said, look, I'm ruling on this now, the safekeeping order, and he'll be transferred to Cass County. So he smiles. He turns back to look for his wife and mother. They weren't there, but he was let out. And when I saw him at this latest hearing that was canceled, he looked better. And I don't know if he is better. He just looked different, a little bit different. So maybe that's where he was supposed to be and should have been from the start. But I don't know if that plays into anything that we'll see in court.
That whole thing was so interesting to watch unfold and how they justified that. I really appreciate hearing what you had to say. And it made me, I pulled up a picture that I, one night on court TV, I was asked about the Odin signs in the area and the expert witness testimony. And of course, my ritual crime expertise is more in closed societies, but cults and polygamy and other kinds of things. But I wanted to share with you, I don't remember if you were on with me this particular night, but Vinny said, I want to talk about these signs and the branches that were moved and other kinds of things that are proof of this Odinistic kind of event. And so anyway, I popped up this, I said, I need you to put up this image. And I put up this image. And what I spoke about on court TV was that this is absolute proof beyond a reason of a doubt. This is absolute proof to someone who believes in Bigfoot that Bigfoot has created these images and artifacts and things that are happening in the woods. Now, an arborist and a forestry guy walked through this very same place and said, yeah, that bad windstorm last night snapped trees and folded them over and made all kinds of crazy things happen and appear. And I guess the point that I'm trying to get across is, I don't know if those things, oops, I'm sorry, I meant to remove that altogether. I don't know if those things are going to be proven to be Odinistic. They certainly could be, they could lean toward that. They have artifacts that appear that way. But to me, it's not the overwhelming evidence that people want it to be. Yeah. And what I found in my own investigations is a lesson I learned from Tim Allen on the Santa Claus movie, and that is sometimes believing is seeing, and that we have to be really careful and really critical about the kinds of things that we share as proof of something happening. And the thing that I like about the criminal justice system is that the criminal justice system doesn't rely on a single form of evidence, that when you go in, there are corroborating pieces of evidence. And if this case was built on an eyewitness and that's it, to me, that's not a strong case versus all of this circumstantial evidence that we see coming together, which kind of takes me to the status hearing that happened on Friday, because we keep thinking we're going to learn maybe something more. And then all of a sudden we find out that the public side was canceled. You flew there to be there. I mean, that had to have been a little disappointing. Tell me about that.
And we got to court early morning. I arrived there around 9 a.m. And then, because I wasn't sure exactly what time it started, and it was 1 p.m., but I thought the public portion of it started at 1, but I didn't mind. I liked being there. And you see journalists that you see, the local news out of Indiana. So you become close to these people who you see a lot. So I showed up early there, and there were whispers about what will happen. And then I see Kelsey. She's having another baby, by the way, and it's always great to see her. And so I talked to her for a while, and I said, "Oh, I thought you were in the private hearing," because it was a little after 1 that I saw them. And she said, "No, we're allowed into the public area." Then I see Becky. I talked to her for a while. And then I saw Superintendent Doug Carter. And I said, "Hi, how are you?" And he's like, "Haven't seen you in a while." And I said, "I heard you're retiring." And he said, "In 5 months." And then we were talking so much, and there were so many people gathered in the rotunda. So right outside, and you hear them, a deputy say, "Keep it down." And Superintendent Carter looks at me and said, "I think we're in trouble," because everyone's so loud out there and talking. And about 20 minutes in, the sheriff, as you said, Sheriff Liggett, came out and said, "There'll be no hearing." Well, then all of a sudden, Becky literally was next to me and said, "What? Why?" Then I see the prosecutor come out. Everyone came out, and he said to the family, "Come with me in this separate room." So no one knew anything. And there were whispers of, could this be a plea deal? And, speculation that we're all thinking to ourselves. And even there's speculation today, which turned out to be rumors. But I believe, based on what I know, was that everything in that first part of the hearing was already discussed. So there was no need to have a part 2. It could be as simple as that with Judge Gull. She just decided, look, everything's done here. Okay, it's adjourned. So there was a bacon festival that I went to in Delphi that next day. So to me, it was great to see everyone, and I'm so glad that I went. But we weren't sure what we were going to find out. My father, being an attorney, said, those status hearings could be nothing. Just, okay, what do you have? What are they? Just kind of housekeeping, if you will, in terms of the court system. So nothing was decided there. And, the trial is set to begin October, I believe, 14th.
Yeah, this is crazy. Well, I want to come back to this, but you said one of my favorite words.
Hey, everybody, it's Mike from Profiling Evil. And did you know that you could go to Amazon and send us a gift card as a donation that we can use in purchasing equipment or, frankly, for buying a Diet Dr. Pepper? All you need to do when you log into your Amazon account is go up and type in Amazon gift card. When you're there, you'll notice that there's an opportunity to go down and just click on the Amazon gift card and put any amount that you'd like in here for us. For instance, I'm going to send myself a $5 gift card, but I'm going to send it to profilingevil@gmail.com. I'm going to send it from me, and this is a gift card. Then once you're done, all you got to do is say, "Hey, I like it," and hit buy now. And it'll send off the gift card. I'll receive it and enjoy whatever that little kind gift is that you give.
But you said one of my favorite words, bacon. Thought we ought to at least chat about what I thought it would be fun to share this picture of you with Mike. And why don't you just talk a little bit about what's going on here and who wouldn't want to go to a bacon festival? Tell me what that is.
It was so fun. It was so fun. We showed up.
It looks sweltering.
Oh my gosh. I'm glad you noticed. It was about 100 degrees. And I think that was taken around 9:30 p.m. And I was there from 2, but it was delicious. The bacon samples, the lasagna with bacon and spinach was delicious. And that's, of course, Mike and Becky. And behind me, I can't get this wrong, who was there. It was the lead singer of Foreigner, is it? Who sang?
Oh, wow.
Nice. So he's on stage behind us. I'm going to find out exactly who that was. But it was a blast to see them and just to see the town. And I was with Anya and Kevin from Murder Sheet, and you'd be surprised how many people came up and said, thank you for your reporting to them, and just talked to me about my book. They were just, it's a normal community, small town where this has really ripped them apart, but also made them stronger. And you could tell just what a strong and loving community they really are.
That's awesome. Well, Susan, I think this is such a great recap, and I really look forward. We're going to talk again right before the trial, but I find a couple of things that have really come to the head for me as I've watched the Delphi cases. Again, I haven't picked a side. I don't believe you picked a side. Even with your book, you're writing factual information that you have that you can expose. But I'm seeing this really weird divide where we're creating these tribes of innocent versus guilty, and nobody has the evidence. They all are just speculating based on their own emotions and circumstances. And I wondered what your thoughts were as you've watched the defense, the prosecution, and I think both sides are guilty of tribalism, and the challenge that Judge Gull, who I believe has taken some incredible hard hits for just trying to manage the criminal justice system. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I thought during the 3 days, it was the first time I had seen Judge Gull in person. And for the 3 days, she really kept it going, kept it moving, and really kept the court in order. I think they're lucky to have her. I don't know if that's a popular thing to say, but I do, from what I saw, think that she's moving things along and fair in terms of what the objections were and what I witnessed. Some of the days were very long, 13 days, and think about the family members and everything they're hearing. But you mentioned this, and it is confirmation bias, and it can happen to anyone and everyone. And you made a good point about the trees. I wasn't on with you that night, but I watched that episode. I was laughing at what you were saying to Vinny, because it's like, this is absolutely confirmation if you are looking for that and you believe that. And I have always said, and I do want to point out, that the book is from the family's perspective. It kind of takes you from the beginning when they were searching for the girls to where we are since Richard Allen was arrested. That's in there. He was arrested, but it's from their perspective. So it's not like I'm going in there trying to solve this, or I'm picking someone that I think it is. Because throughout this investigation, I would get calls from CNN and they'd say, "Oh, what do you know about this arrest?" And it had nothing to do with Delphi. It was just a different crime in Indiana. So I'd text Tobe Lesenby, who was the sheriff at the time, and he'd say, "We're looking into him," just like this was early on. "We're looking into everyone," he was basically saying. Then the headline became, "Oh, they're looking into this guy for Delphi." And it concerned the families because they thought, we don't want people to think it's solved. We want people to still look for this person. So then there was a complete blackout. So I think there were mistakes made throughout, and something they never thought they would face. But I do believe that the judicial system works. I've said it before. I do believe that. And I feel that jury selection, which will be in a different county, and then they'll be sequestered in Carroll County for the trial. They're guessing about a month that this will happen. So I believe that there is fairness there. They will listen to all of the evidence, and they will decide amongst themselves without bias. That's what we're hoping for. That's what our system is known for. And I think that could happen, because if you are following this case, and if you already have your opinion, and there's strong ones out there, there are people who don't follow it like we do. I remember speaking at CrimeCon several times, and some people had never heard of it. And there's something called CrimeCon. So I believe you can find jurors who are willing to be fair and to look at all of the evidence and see. It's going to boil down to, what evidence are you allowed to show? How is it connected? Is it physical evidence? Is it just the unspent bullet? Is there physical evidence that we don't know of yet, that could be in discovery, of course, that we haven't heard? Possibly. What is the alibi of the people that they've discussed? Maybe the third party names that they want to bring in. So I think that'll all play itself out. But there has definitely been a divide. And I think, you know who it hurts the most? This has nothing to do with me. It truly doesn't. It hurts the families, especially when they get criticized or they get sucked into this. And there is a gag order, and there's been criticism about that. But because I think that for Becky, at least, I think she found healing in talking to the press, and I think that hurts her. But so there is a gag order. But then people say some hurtful things. Not everyone. I mean, I love watching your show, Mike. I love watching certain YouTube channels. I'm a fan of that. And there are people who are really gracious to the families and do a fair assessment of what they think and what may happen. I mean, that's what we did at CNN and HLN. I'd have attorneys on to say, what do you think? But we truly don't know. And that's what the judicial system is for. And, I see Richard Allen's now. When I first saw him, it was a little jarring to see him shackled and walking in, and then looking at his wife crying and his mother, and then being next to Mike and Becky and Kelsey and Tara. It's just, it's gut wrenching to be there because it's their loss and the girls are never coming back. And it's gut wrenching for Richard Allen's wife, who was married to him for 30 years. So no one wins here. There is no winning. It's all about justice for the girls.
That's the part that often people don't get to experience, is all of the collateral damage caused by these kinds of cases. It is going to be really interesting to me because if this state continues to be successful in getting pieces of key evidence in, I think it's going to be a really tough hill for Richard Allen to climb. And I know there are some who are immediately going to attack me for this, but the confessions alone, if it's true 61 times, that's more than, hey, I stumbled and made a mistake and said something I didn't mean to say. Mm-hmm. If you put yourself on the Mononahai Bridge the day of the murders and bring it out yourself that I happened to be out there, and you somewhat match the description, more to others than to some, that is a big issue. And if you keep adding these things on top, and if this spent bullet is actually ballistically tied to the bullet that was recovered inside of the home in that search warrant, and people have a hard time with this, but there are different scientific studies to look at the striations where that casing is pulled out of the weapon, completely different than a weapon that's been fired, certainly not as much or as heavy duty as some of that evidence could be. But if they can truly prove that only this gun recovered in that search warrant matched the scrapes on this particular bullet found next to the body of the victims, that's a really big hill to climb, because then all of a sudden you got all these things piling in. And are there more people involved? Who knows? Right. It will be interesting to see how things unfold. And I guess that's the final question I want to ask you, is because these are the kinds of crazy things I witnessed throughout my entire career investigating cases, are these weird anomalies that actually were true but had nothing to do with the investigation. And that is, tell me about the relationship between Richard Allen, Keegan Kline, and Ron. I can't remember his last name now.
Oh, Ron Logan.
Ron Logan. Is there any relationship at all? But how all of those geographically, perversion-wise, or Richard Allen saying, I just walked down the trail. I just think, how do all those three suspects rise to the surface, along with the ones we're hearing through the Odenistic angles and others? Right.
And will we hear Keegan Kline's name? Because that was brought up during that 3-day hearing. Will that be allowed? Will Ron Logan, his name, be allowed? He has passed away, sadly, of COVID. So will his name be able to be mentioned? And here's what I wrote in my book, and here's what I still think. That throughout the investigation from 2017 until someone was in custody in 2022, there were a lot of names that were brought up. Really bad people. There's bad people in every state, but really bad people did horrific things. And no one was ever arrested for this. I mean, no one. And they could have easily pinned this on someone else that wasn't your local CVS guy, married 30 years with a daughter who just got married. That would have been easier if they wanted to just pin it on someone, in my opinion. So I don't believe there's any connection. I don't. And bad things can happen during the same time in one town. I just discussed Scott Peterson after watching the documentary. I was just on a show talking about that and the robbery that happened next door to their home, Lacey Peterson's, or across the way with the van, and it was a burglary. So two things, and I did mention Delphi. I said two things terrible things can happen at the same time. Could the girls have been catfished by Keegan Kline, who was pretending to be Anthony Shots? Yes. Yes. That doesn't mean he murdered them. It doesn't. And it doesn't show that. And I don't believe, based on, and you know much more than me, Mike, when it comes to this, but I asked Paul Holes, former cold case investigator connected to the Golden State Killer. I said, is it, and he said, my belief is what he has seen the most of, that usually people like this, based on the information he had, work alone. Picture convincing someone else to murder 2 young girls, like convincing to get a group together to do that. That seems unlikely to me.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I know that you'll be there, and we'll continue to chat about this. I want to thank you so much for taking time, Susan. And I want to remind everybody, you see that little picture on the screen with Susan's name, Down the Hill, her book. Please go out and pick that up. In fact, if you go to the link that we're putting down below, you'll be able to get that, and you can get it in ebook or in a hardbound version. Is it paperback yet, Suze?
Not yet. Not yet.
Okay. And I just want to say thank you, not only for your friendship, but for your very calm and delightful demeanor. And, you know, one other thing I want to say thanks for is we bounce a lot of ideas off of each other that are ghost stories that are popping up. And we say, hey, do you know if this is authoritative? And the thing that I like about you is that you always lean on the authoritative, not this is a possible breaking story. And I think today was a perfect example where there are some YouTubers, and I've seen some that have already taken it down, that started projecting that Richard Allen was going to change his plea. And there have been quite a few things on X and a few other things. And I see people now having to dial that back. And while it might feel good to be the one to announce something, I sure appreciate your stance of let's do it with authority behind what we're going to chat about. And that's what I think we did today. And I just want to say thank you.
Hey everybody, look who I'm hanging out with. And listen, I'm not attending choir practice, but I just wanted to tell you that you need to be watching Profiling Evil YouTube. Don't miss it. I'm telling you, there's something there for you every single time. I never miss. You shouldn't either.
Well, thank you, Mike. Yeah, the knee jerk is to jump in. And being at CNN for so long with so many attorneys and having to wait to move forward with it. It's like, if the information is true, you have to wait until you really know that it is. And back to the Bacon Festival, I hope that I'm getting the band right. Because if I'm not, they're going to say, she jumped the gun on that. It's a Journey or Foreigner. I'm going to figure it out and then text you on who was there. But it was amazing, the Bacon Festival in Delphi. And I want to thank everyone there for being so hospitable.
That's awesome. Well, folks, thanks to Susan Hendricks. You can find Profiling Evil on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and Twitter. And if you like audio podcasts, make sure you're tuning into Profiling Evil podcasts on your favorite podcast platform. In fact, Susan, this will be out. I think we'll put it out tonight on YouTube. And then in a couple of weeks, we'll put it out on audio podcast and hopefully continue this true crime investigation into the Delphi case. And hopefully people will continue to do that. So thanks again. And to everyone out there, thanks so much for your support of Profiling Evil. We'll see you all soon at the next crime scene.
Thanks, Mike.